this is going to be a slightly long theoretical video on meditation. Now, I want this YouTube channel to be a proper blend between the physical practices as well as the theoretical aspect, because even traditionally also, if you see, Tantra has had two aspects. One is Agam, which is the practical cult, and then the second one is Nigam, which is the philosophical or the theoretical aspect of Tantra. Together, Agam and Nigam, together they make up the school of Tantra. So this is going to be a theoretical video, and normally whenever people talk about meditation, they talk in circles. They don't give a proper definition of meditation. People are not able to explain meditation the way it should be explained. Normally people just talk in circles, and even Albert Einstein once said that if you can't explain something simply, then you don't completely understand it. And that's why I believe that there has to be a better and simpler explanation of meditation, right? So one of the reasons why I've made this video is so that I can explain meditation in a very simple manner, and at the same time I will be elaborating about certain technical aspects, certain scientific aspects of meditation. So whenever we say meditation, we basically look at the great yogis sitting in meditation for such a long time, right? There are yogis who sit for many days, basically sit still for many days in meditation. So that is what comes into our that's the picture that comes into our mind whenever we talk about meditation. So I mentioned Albert Einstein because yoga is related to all the fields of science. Basically, we all know that it is related to biology, but it is also related to chemistry as well as physics. So the reason why I mentioned Albert Einstein is that this theory, a lot of times this theory of relativity, and now I know you must be wondering that why am I digressing in a video where I'm talking about meditation? Why am I talking about theory of relativity? Because there is obviously a connection between that and yoga and meditation. So basically, whenever people talk about the theory of relativity, they have completely wrong implications. Like they have a very wrong impression of it. All the implications that people come up with when they talk about the theory of relativity is that they talk about things like time travel. But in the actual sense, the true implication of the theory of relativity is that there is actually no such thing as time. So whatever we call as time is actually nothing but a psychic measurement of movement. Whenever we talk about the physical reality, there is the fabric of space. Just like there is this fabric, this is a two-dimensional fabric. You can literally look at space as a three-dimensional fabric, and in that fabric of space there is matter, right? So that matter is capable of stretching. For example, if I press the fabric at one point, the fabric stretches, right? Similarly, matter also stretches this three-dimensional fabric of space wherever it exists. And because of that stretching or bending of the fabric of space, there is movement around those places where there is a proper bending of the space. And this movement, when we perceive this movement, when we look at this movement with our eyes, when we perceive it and when we conceive the movement in our mind, and when we measure the movement, that is what is known as time. Otherwise, in the physical sense, in the physical reality, there is actually no such thing as time. So this time is basically a psychic measurement of movement. So if I have to explain it even better, like when we say a day or 24 hours, basically that just means that the earth has rotated about its axis once. That is what that movement of the earth about its own axis, that movement is what we call as 24 hours. When we measure that movement, That is what we know. That is what we call as 24 hours. And when that Earth moves around the sun once, that revolution is what we call as 365 days or 1 year. So basically, the Earth rotates 365 times as it revolves around the sun once. So this movement, when we perceive it in our mind, that is what we call as time. So you see, time actually only exists in our mind, in our perception. It is not actually existing in the real world. And that is what the true implication, the theory of relativity really is. And how is this connected to meditation? Well, like I said, when you look at the yogis sitting still in meditation for many days, how are they doing it? Well, the very simple answer is because the very fact that there is no such thing as time has become a physical reality for those people. Like I said, time is only existing in our mind, in our perception. So when that fact becomes an experience in your mind, that is when you can actually sit in meditation for a very long time, for many days. So basically, how do they do it? What is the secret? Well, the secret is very simple. Maybe you're sitting in the physical reality, maybe you're sitting in meditation for, let's say, 10 days. But in your mental reality, in your psychic realm, maybe just 5 minutes have gone by. And that is one of the biggest secrets of long meditation. When a person sits still in meditation, even 10 days might feel like 5 minutes. And we all know that the great Gautam Buddha also meditated for 10 days. And this is what the actual secret of such long meditation practices really is. And basically, so I hope I made it clear that time is basically just a psychic measurement. Okay, psychic measurement of movement. All the movements happening in the universe, when you psychically measure it, that is what time is. So is it possible to change this measurement within us? So basically, when I am saying that for the yogi who is meditating for 10 days, maybe only 5 minutes have passed by in his mind. So basically, that yogi simply changed the perception of time within him, right? He basically slowed down his internal time. Whereas in reality, 10 days were happening, but in his mind, in the yogi's mind, the time changed, or rather slowed down. So basically, this means that you can literally change your own internal clock, or rather either slow down the internal clock, or fast forward it. So we all know what happens if you slow down the internal clock. Like I said, internally only 5 minutes have passed by, but in the physical reality, 10 days have passed by. The earth has rotated 10 times, but you never perceived it. You basically were in your own mind, in your own psychic realm, and in that realm it was just 5 minutes. So this is basically slowing down of your internal clock. So is it really possible to actually do this? Is there something like an internal clock within us? Of course there is. So what is this internal clock within us? Well, you must have heard of something known as the circadian rhythm. In every human being, or rather in every living creature, there is a circadian rhythm, which is basically your biological clock, which is what regulates the physiological changes happening within you according to the day-night cycle, according to the rising of the sun and the setting of the sun. The body basically undergoes certain physiological changes, and these changes are brought about by an internal biological clock. This biological clock basically is a combination of two organs. One is the very famous endocrine gland known as the pineal gland, which is situated right above the pituitary. The pituitary gland is right at this level, and the pineal gland is slightly above it. Basically, it is at the center of the brain. It is a part of an organ known as the epithalamus. Okay, so this pineal gland, along with another organ known as the suprachiasmatic nuclei, which is a part of the organ known as the hypothalamus. This suprachiasmatic nuclei, which is SCN, as well as the pineal gland. Together, they are like this internal clock, this internal biological clock within you that regulate, or rather, that run the physiological changes that happen, the the day-night cycle which happens within you, within your body, that is actually regulated by these two organs, mainly SCN as well as the pineal gland. So basically, if you gain a certain level of control, if you stimulate this part of the body, and if you gain a certain level of control, and if you can either speed up your internal clock or slow it down, so that is what control basically means, right? So that is what a yogi actually does when he sits in meditation. He basically has a certain level of control, or rather, I would say he has reached a state where he has stimulated this internal clock, the pineal gland as well as the SCN. Now, what do I mean by controlling this biological clock? Like I said, one example I've already spoken about. Like internally, the clock becomes so slow that only within you, within your psychic perception, only 5 minutes have passed by. But in the physical reality, 10 days may have passed by. So this is one of the secrets of how the yogis sit in meditation for such a long time. The other application of this is like if you do the reverse thing, like if you speed up the biological clock, then what you can do is, in reality, only a few minutes may have passed by. Like let's say 10 to 15 minutes may have passed by. But internally, like in your mind, many hours may have passed by. And this is one of the secrets of the very famous power nap that people take. You must have seen many people have this ability, or rather, this is a very good thing that they do. Whenever they feel tired, they can simply close their eyes for, let's say, 5 minutes or 10 minutes or 15 minutes. And after those 15 minutes, when they wake up, they feel very fresh, as if they had a proper 5-hour or 6-hour sleep. Now, this again is basically done when you're able to directly access the deep sleep state. So basically, your sleep states, there are mainly two states when you sleep. There is the rapid eye movement phase, which is the REM sleep. That is when you experience dreams and your eyes move rapidly. And then after this state, there is the deep sleep state. This again is brought about by the pineal gland. Pineal gland secretes a hormone known as melatonin, which induces this sleep-like state. And when you directly go, like when you move from the REM state to the deep sleep state, that is what actually takes a lot of time when you actually sleep. That is the reason why people sometimes require long hours of sleep, because they are not able, they basically going through the REM phase and then slowly moving to the deep sleep state. But then there are some people who can directly access the deep sleep state. That means they have gained a certain control over their biological clock, where with the help of which they can directly go into the deep sleep state. That means they will basically skip the REM, the rapid eye movement phase, and because of that, they will be able to experience the main rest that happens when you sleep, the main parasympathetic action which happens due to the secretion of melatonin by the pineal gland happens during this deep sleep state. That is when the body regenerates. So if you have a certain level of control and stimulation of the pineal gland, you can literally control this particular part, and this is what allows people to do those power naps. If I'm not wrong, there was this great conqueror named Napoleon Bonaparte, who was a master of this small power nap system. And this was one of the secrets why he was such a successful conqueror, because he was able to take, even in the middle of a long war or battle, he could simply go into these small power naps. Even when cannons and weapons would be fired, he would simply sleep like a baby for a few minutes, and then he would wake up feeling very fresh and energetic, while all his enemies would be tired due to the long battles. And it was this reason why Napoleon Bonaparte was such a successful conqueror. So you can see how useful this system of controlling and stimulating the internal clock really is, which is basically the pineal gland as well as the SCN. So, so what exactly does it mean to stimulate the pineal gland? Well, let's just understand one thing. The pineal gland, just like every other endocrine gland, it secretes a hormone. This hormone is basically called melatonin. This hormone is what induces the sleep-like state when you go to sleep, and this is the hormone that actually triggers the parasympathetic mode, the healing or regeneration mode. So if you actually do the various yogic practices and meditation, you can literally stimulate this gland and activate it to the point where it secretes more melatonin, so that the body is always in a parasympathetic and regenerative phase. This is one of the secrets of the long lives of yogis. They basically, their body is really healthy because they have really active and stimulated pineal glands. So I mentioned the biological clock, and obviously the pineal gland and the SCN are part of your anatomy. So this brings me, so I'm done with the physical aspect of meditation. So I hope everyone understood what it means to be in that meditative state. It's basically due to a very active pineal gland. Coming to the biological aspect. So biologically speaking, so I have already spoken about how the various yoga practices are not really just external musculoskeletal exercises, but rather they are a glandular exercise. They are more like inner sizes. They work on the endocrine glands. So obviously, the whole endocrine system gets properly exercised due to the various yogic practices, namely the asanas, the breathing practices, as well as meditation. So obviously, if it is activating, or rather, if it is an inner size, if it is an exercise for the inner system, the inner endocrine system will obviously exercise all the glands, including the pineal gland, and uh, that is where the system of yoga, or rather the different techniques of yoga, are very important, because you are literally working on your internal system. If there is no proper system in place, you will basically do more harm to the body than actually do good to the body. So that is why a proper system of yoga is very essential, so that you progress properly and develop each and every gland of your endocrine system, including the pineal gland, the way it should be developed. Now, there is an interesting fact about the pineal gland. For a major part in our human history, the pineal gland was never given as much importance by the biologists or the scientists as it was given by the philosophers and the spiritual cult followers, or basically the mystical, basically in the field of mysticism and philosophy. That is the field where the pineal gland was actually given a lot of importance, because it has always been associated with this third mystical eye in the center of the forehead. That is one of the reasons why the main god of the Hindus, the Lord Shiva, has a third eye, because he was known as a master of of Tantra or yoga, and he basically had a completely activated pineal gland. So it was metaphorically shown as an open third eye, but in reality, there isn't actually. The reason why it was associated with a third eye is because in the evolutionary past, basically millions of years ago, there was this lizard-like creature. In the evolutionary past, there was this lizard-like creature that actually had a third eye on top of its head, and this third eye was light sensitive. It would basically regulate the biological cycle by by being extremely light sensitive, by being photosensitive. It had proper cells that the normal two eyes have. In fact, even today, if you see, there are certain reptiles, certain amphibians and reptiles that actually have a third eye, in the sense that the organ is associated with the pineal gland or this third eye literally has cone cells and rod cells along with cornea. Like for example, if you look at a lizard known as the Tuatara lizard actually has a third eye, and that organ, which is basically associated with the pineal gland, it literally has rod cells and cone cells, which are the photoreceptive cells, and it also has cornea, which is again the main covering of the eye. So that is the reason why the pineal gland has always been associated with a third eye. But in human beings, this photoreceptive part, mainly the rod cells and the cone cells, this photoreceptive part is completely vestigial. So it's not, but the thing is, pineal gland is not completely vestigial. It still serves a purpose. Like I said, it secretes melatonin, but the photoreceptive part of it is completely gone. That's why it is semi-vestigial. It's just that as evolution happened, the cerebral cortex, it kept on developing, right? And so this third eye on top of the head, it descended down and it became the pineal gland. So that is the reason why mysticism and spirituality, as well as philosophy, actually gave a lot of importance to this third eye. But biologists did not give it that much importance, because they literally thought that it is vestigial. But in modern times, slowly this gland is gaining a lot of importance even amongst biologists, and it is a good thing, because yoga has already always spoken about how important this gland is. And in fact, all of the yogic practices, including meditation, is basically done in order to keep this pineal gland active, as well as to stimulate this pineal gland. And now, why is this important? Well, for the simple reason that the pineal gland is something that, as the body ages, right from the onset of puberty, just like aging is associated with the shrinking of the thymus gland, which is a gland over here in the center of the chest, similarly, aging is also associated with something known as the calcification of the pineal gland. And this is something that has been, people are researching on this recently. So that is the reason why the pineal gland is slowly gaining a lot of importance in the field of biology and science, because they have found that as the body ages, the pineal gland becomes more and more dysfunctional. In fact, the production of melatonin also rapidly decreases as the body ages, and there is this calcification of the pineal gland, which basically, by the time you're really old, you can literally see the pineal gland in the X-rays. You can see the calcified pineal gland. That's how much the pineal gland gets calcified as you age. So this calcification is also famously known as brain sand, although it is not sand, it is not silica, but it is a compound of calcium. That's why more appropriate term would be calcification of the pineal gland. And this calcification can be avoided or slowed down by the practice of yoga and meditation. So am I implying that you can open a third mystical eye by the practice of yoga and meditation? No, not at all, because quite literally there is no third eye. It's just that you can stimulate the pineal gland, and normally the pineal gland will secrete melatonin only when you're sleeping, and when you're awake there will be a hormone known as serotonin, which basically creates that restless sympathetic state. By the practice of yoga and meditation, you are simply stimulating the pineal gland so that it secretes more melatonin. So what that will do is, even when you're awake, even in the awake state, there will be a sense of calm, there will be a sense of there will be a certain parasympathetic mode which will always be on. That regenerative mode will always be on even when you're awake, because normally the pineal gland secretes melatonin after it senses that there is no light. Now, how does that happen? Even though there are no photoreceptive cells in the pineal gland, you can still sense light through the retina of these two eyes. Through the normal eyes, there is a neural network that connects to the pineal gland, and that's how it senses. The light, even though it itself doesn't have any photoreceptor cells. And apart from that, the pineal gland is interestingly still connected to the visual cortex, the visual part of the cortex which is behind. It is still connected to that, and that is how it is. It is still a bit sensitive to the day-night cycle, and that is the reason why it is capable of secreting melatonin when you are sleeping. But what the yogic practices will do is that it will stimulate the pineal gland and make it secrete more melatonin. It will help in either avoiding or slowing down the calcification of pineal gland, which is associated with the aging process. So all these things, when they happen, what it means is your body is in both sympathetic as well as in the parasympathetic mode all the time. So that is one of the advantages of doing yoga and different meditation techniques. So now physiologically you can see that the SCN and the pineal gland together, they basically regulate your biological clock. But I spoke about the perception of time, right? It's not just physiology, it's also the mind, right? There is a psychic structure in place in the human mind-body complex. So when I said 10 days feel like 5 minutes, it's basically perception of time. So it is more of a psychic entity. It is a psychic perception. So how does the pineal gland affect that? That is also because, after all, perception of time, or rather conception of time, or rather conception of anything happens in the cortex, in the cerebral cortex, right? So how does that relate to the glandular system? Well, if you remember, I have already spoken about how each and every endocrine gland is not just a physiological organ, it is also a psychological organ. Like there are psychic propensities attached to each and every endocrine gland. Like, for example, fear and adrenal gland, they are obviously related. Similarly, as and when you go up in the endocrine system, the psychic propensities also become higher and higher. They become more and more human and more divine. So since the pineal gland is at the topmost level, so the psychic propensity associates, there is very much a very higher psychic propensity attached with the pineal gland. And let me explain it in terms of biology as well. So time perception not only happens at the cortex level, it happens in an organ known as the hippocampus. There is a part of the brain, it's known as the hippocampus, which is a part of the limbic system. The limbic system is the mammalian brain. It is what developed as mammals, as animals evolved into mammals. That's when it also started creating more and more complex limbic system, and hippocampus is basically a part of that limbic system which deals with emotions, emotional memory, as well as deals with decision making, as well as time encoding. So basically the hippocampus, it is concerned with short-term memory as well as long-term memory. So when we say short and long, it obviously is related to time, because whenever we say short and long, it actually is talking about time. That's what it is talking about. So basically time encoding also happens at the level of the hippocampus. The way it happens is short-term memory. Whenever something happens, some movement happens and it gets registered, it is done through the system of the hippocampus. Hippocampus basically is what is helping you register those movements or those experiences, those short-term experiences, and that is what is registered as short-term memory. So that is where the hippocampus plays an important role. So, and this short-term memory then slowly, as and when the memory gets consolidated, it becomes a long-term memory. So obviously, this whole time encoding is dependent on this organ known as the hippocampus. And the interesting thing is that there are neurodegenerative diseases like the Alzheimer's disease, where the person is not able to create newer memories. His long-term memories or old memories will be intact, but he or she will not be able to make new memories because the hippocampus area suffers a lot of neurodegeneration. And it has been found that the pineal gland, the melatonin hormone secreted particularly by the pineal gland, plays a very, very important role in the neurogenesis, that is the generation of new cells in the hippocampus area. So you can imagine if hippocampus is associated with short-term memory or the registering of newer experiences, you can imagine the level of plasticity that is required by the hippocampus, right? Like it should be very adaptive because it has to create new experience, it has to register new experiences. So it should have that ability to create those things required to register that short-term memory. So obviously, it has to be very adaptive. It requires a lot of plasticity. So this region therefore becomes very important, and it is this part which suffers a lot of degeneration in neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's. And it has been found that in people who are actually suffering from Alzheimer's, there is a very distinct degeneration or a dysfunction of the pineal gland. Pineal gland gets really calcified in patients suffering from Alzheimer's. So, and it has been found that the melatonin secreted by particularly the pineal gland. Why do I say particularly the pineal gland? Because melatonin is a hormone that is secreted by other organs in the body too. But the one that is specifically secreted by the pineal gland is very much important for the generation of cells in the hippocampus area, which is related to time encoding. So you can see that very much the pineal gland as well as the SCN, which is a part of the hypothalamus, is a very, very important structure when it comes to the physiological aspect of the internal clock also, and as well as the psychological perception of time. So up till now, whatever I said, it makes a lot of theoretical sense, right? It makes a lot of rational, logical or scientific sense. Everything seems pretty rational right from the start when I spoke about the fact that there is no entitative existence of time, that it is just a psychic entity or rather a psychic measurement of movement. Right from that explanation to the biological explanation about our internal clock, the circadian rhythm and the internal clock system, to all the yogic practices that can be used to stimulate this internal clock system, namely the SCN of the hypothalamus as well as the pineal gland. So basically the tantric practices can literally stimulate the hypothalamus, the SCN and the pineal gland. In fact, this actually explains how the yogis manage to sit in meditation for such a long time, because the hunger center of the body is basically coming from the urge for hunger and thirst comes from the hypothalamus. Hypothalamus is the hunger and thirst center. So if you stimulate it, you can literally control the hunger and thirst center, and that is how that's what explains that is what is explaining how the meditators, they can meditate for such a long time without feeling hungry or thirsty. So definitely it makes a lot of sense. But then why is it that it's not a part of conventional science yet? Well, because of the simple fact that science requires a large sample size, whereas indeed, Tantra looks at the body like an electrochemical circuit. It's literally functioning like like the glandular system as well as the nervous system together. They are like this electrochemical circuit, and like any other electrical circuit, for any circuit to function, you need to close the switch, right? So the closing of the switch is important for the proper functioning of the circuit. Similarly, this even though this is sounding very theoretical, but if you indeed close the circuit according to the circuit design, then indeed the circuit will function the way it is supposed to function. And in this case, in our case, in the case of the human body, the design is very much evident, like especially in the tantric practices like the tantric Vajrasan and the tongue lock. I've already made videos on that. You can check out the videos. The links of those videos are in the description below. So basically, when you do these tantric practices like the tantric Vajrasan and the Khechari mudra, you basically are basically closing that circuit according to the design. And this is what the design is, right? Like if you compare our bodies with our closest relatives, the great apes, our bodies have this erect S. I've said this before. Our spine is erect and it has that erect S-shaped curve, along with the fact that the opposable thumb of the lower limb is clubbed with the toes, unlike the design of our closest relatives, the great apes, who have opposable thumb in the legs as well. So that design is perfectly simulated in this. So you're literally closing the circuit according to the design of the circuit. So this is what is required. Like you at least need to be able to sit in this posture for a few minutes for it to actually function the way I have theoretically explained. So when that is the case, it is hard to get a huge sample size, because firstly, this knowledge has always been a little bit esoteric. Very few people know about it. But the thing is, even if you know about it, the fact that it will require a certain level of practice and dedication to actually get it right, to get it the way I have done it. So basically, that is the reason why it is not a part of mainstream conventional science yet. But hopefully, it will become popular enough, and then everyone will have a larger sample size to prove all the theoretical things that I have said in this video. So I mentioned the electrochemical circuit, right? So obviously there is a chemical basis to what we are doing in meditation. So when it comes to the chemical basis, there are a lot of youngsters who basically use outside chemicals in the form of psychedelic drugs to induce this state of spiritual high, these elevated spiritual experiences. In order to induce these elevated spiritual experiences, a lot of people use drugs and chemicals from outside. They put it from outside. So, like for example, there is this very powerful psychedelic drug called DMT molecule, dimethyltryptamine, which is often found in psychoactive substances like the native South American indigenous drug known as ayahuasca. So DMT is found in such drugs and drinks. So they basically use this and it has been reported that a lot of people feel spiritually elevated. They report feeling extreme spiritual understanding, or rather some sort of similar spiritual enlightening experience when they actually use these drugs. But obviously the thing is, for example, DMT is quite endogenous, meaning it is found everywhere in nature. It's found in certain plants, it's found in animals, it's also found in human cerebrospinal fluid. but the concentration is very less for it to actually create a psychedelic effect. But there is speculation that DMT is synthesized within the body, especially in the pineal gland and the lungs, with due to the practice of certain meditation techniques or yogic techniques. But of course, this is highly speculative, and even if there is synthesis of this molecule within the body, the concentration is very less for it to actually have a psychedelic effect. But having said that, the main thing to understand over here is that meditation secretes those feel-good hormones from within. You don't have to put them from outside. You can literally synthesize them from within. In fact, the hormones that I mentioned, the melatonin and serotonin, they are structural analogs of DMT molecule. So these structural, in chemistry, the structural analog is basically chemical compounds that are structurally almost similar. Give and take a few atoms or subgroups here and there, the structure is basically the same, and that's what serotonin and melatonin are. They are structural analogs of DMT. So basically, the bottom line is, even though the actual synthesis of chemicals like DMT from within the body through yogic practices can be considered a little bit speculative, because even the concentration is not very high. But the bottom line is, instead of putting chemicals from outside, you can actually synthesize these feel-good chemicals, feel-good hormones from within the practice of meditation and yoga. So yes, there is very much a huge application of yoga and meditation when it comes to the field of addictions and controlling the addictions in the youth, because otherwise they are very dependent on these outside chemicals to get that spiritual high, whereas in fact you can actually get that from within, right? So that's about the chemical basis of meditation. Now all these explanations are very technical, right? All the things that I spoke about, these are very scientific and technical. A lot of spiritual people out there might not like the explanation that I gave about meditation, because it's based on the three main fields of science: physics, chemistry, and biology, and it was too technical, right? So I also have a spiritual explanation of meditation for those people who would rather want a spiritual definition for meditation. So basically, in the yogic science, oftentimes we talk about states of consciousness. So like there is the awake state or the conscious state. It's called Jagrut Avastha in Sanskrit. Then there is the subconscious state or the dream state, the rapid eye movement sleep phase, which is also known as Swapna Avastha in Sanskrit. And then there is the deep sleep state or the unconscious state, the state where you are completely unaware of your existence. That's what you experience during the deep sleep state. So these are the three states of conscience, which is generally accepted even in the conventional sciences. Awake state, REM sleep state, and deep sleep state. Conscious, subconscious, and completely unconscious states of consciousness. But yoga defines a fourth state, which is called the Turiya state, or in English it's called the superconscious state, and it is also equated to the whole concept of samadhi in Sanskrit, or in the yogic sciences. The term samadhi is actually similar to this state. So what exactly is this Turiya state? So basically, you are not aware of your subconscious and your unconscious mind, right? The conscious mind is what has awareness. So basically this is a bit hard to imagine, but imagine a state of consciousness where you are aware of your conscious, your subconscious, as well as your unconscious state. So this type of awareness seems a bit hard to imagine because very few people actually experience it. But I can actually give you a certain example in terms of the subconscious state. Like you must have heard of this term called lucid dreaming. Lucid dreaming is basically a state where you are aware of the fact that you are dreaming. So normally when you dream, when you sleep, and during the REM, rapid eye movement sleep phase, when you start dreaming, normally you are not aware that you are dreaming, right? You think that it is reality. So basically you are not aware of your subconscious and unconscious states. But in the lucid dreaming state, you are actually aware, and this is a very common thing, you can check it out online. In the lucid dreaming state, you are actually aware that you are dreaming. And this is actually the first sign that your mind is getting more and more meditative. As you progress in meditation, like for example, even I experience lucid dreaming a lot. Ever since I started meditation seriously, I was able to go into lucid dreaming states where you actually know. And this is not even without meditation. A lot of people experience lucid dreaming. So that is actually a sign that your mind is getting more and more meditative. So in the lucid dreaming state, you are aware that you're dreaming. You can literally control your dreams in that state. And basically, if you take that a bit further, imagine a state of conscience where you're also aware of the deep sleep state. It's a bit hard to imagine, isn't it? You can still imagine being aware of your subconscious mind, which is similar to lucid dreaming. But to be aware of your unconscious mind, that is what is commonly called state of samadhi in yoga. And basically, as and when you progress in meditation, you will become more and more aware of your REM sleep phase or your deep sleep phase, and that will actually also cause you to be more. You'll be able to utilize your sleep time even more when that happens. So there are a lot of applications, a lot of uses of meditation. Of course, there are many benefits of meditation, and you can check out, the whole internet is filled with a lot of people talking about the benefits of meditation. That is the reason why I didn't talk about the common benefits related to stress and anxiety, because everybody knows about it. It is a scientifically proven fact. That's the reason I made this video, so that I can talk about things that are not normally spoken about. So hopefully this is the spiritual basis or spiritual explanation of what a meditative state would really look like. So hopefully you were able to learn something new about meditation. I tried to be as technical as well as at the same time as simple as possible. But in the end, if you want an even simpler definition of meditation, then quite simply you can say that meditation is nothing but concentrated thinking. That's it. So hope you liked the video, and that's it for now. Thanks for watching.